based on what I've heard, I built a 180-day plan. But before I talk about that, and that 180-day plan is in your packet, I would appreciate hearing from council what your expectations are relative to what the city manager needs to achieve here.
I wanted to know what your plan was.
Sure. And it's, you know, and Councilor Bermudez is here. She remembers back in 2013, this was something that we navigated through in my interview back in 2013. Was how do we pull together a plan that really looks at necessary steps in order to hit the ground running. I am a planner by nature. It's just kind of in my DNA. And I'll certainly go through all of these in as much detail as you want. They're 4 pages. And you know, primarily, when I think about the current priorities in the city, staffing, the budget, and training of our employees are 3 very loud and recurring themes. And as we delve into that, identifying for each department the top 3 priorities, and then the top 2 to 3 initiatives that each department wants to see over the next 1 to 2 years, and then the top 3 to 5 challenges that they're facing today across all of our different departments. Month 1, this is important to get mapped out and hear from our employees. I do understand there are many positions that are vacant, so we'll certainly work through that understanding. Second point on staffing, from what I understand, our finance director is vacant, police chief, utilities director, public works director, building official. Those are all vacant spots. Megan Antrim and I had great success. When I started in 2013, she had been brought in on the finance team, and I was able to promote her to finance director in January of 2014. I think the work that she has done, not only for the city of Alpine, but for the county over the years, really speaks to her merit and her integrity. There are also 9 supervisory positions. One of the notes I had also made on the plan is that staffing of the police chief, which is fundamentally very important. One of my good friends from Albuquerque is a gentleman by the name of Alan Banks. He's now the police chief at Round Rock, Texas. He's been there the last 5 years. Was just actually voted the Citizen of the Year in Round Rock. Really neat individual. And I happened to see him a couple weekends ago. And he mentioned to me, he says, Eric, if the city of Alpine needs any help, I'm certainly glad. It's part of what we do in Texas and helping each other. He was the interim police chief in Albuquerque, New Mexico before he went to Round Rock as well, so a deep amount of experience there. And I think that speaks to what we have in the state and in our region and our community is a lot of people that are willing to help when they're asked. And a lot of that has got to occur. Leadership training with our supervisors and our department heads, how we best communicate with employees, how we best communicate with each other is critical to the success of the Alpine City government. I want to start that immediately as we're filling in the holes in employment. Human resources, I understand the personnel policy has gone through some changes. Taking a step back and understanding what makes sense for Alpine. Where is council in their comfort level with some of the recent changes? And certainly with Brooke here now as a new human resource director, we have the opportunity to take another lens and another look at that. And I'm paraphrasing on some of this. Certainly approving the budget this month, we've got to do that. It's important from a state law perspective. As we look forward, do we look at amendments to the budget? Certainly in my first year previously, we had gone through and did some amendments to restructure, all staying within the tax rate. From a communications plan, the things that I envision and think about is certainly, I used to give a city manager report at a council meeting. Intentionally, I will always do that. It's just what I feel is important in the job. But in the short term, a weekly update to council, to the mayor on these steps on this 180-day plan. I also look to either open council chambers or find other venues across the city for once a week have what we call a coffee with the city manager or something that's appropriate that allows citizens from the community who may not want to set a formal appointment, but they can come in and visit with me on any need or idea or thought, or just come have coffee and talk. Other things I think about are our governing assurances. We heard earlier today on TCEQ. I do remember that notice, and I do remember the A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J items that were on that particular notice. It's nice to see we're down to 2. We've got to get those moving forward. The other thing Mr. Ponton had mentioned too was relative to SCP projects. So these are environmental friendly projects that if you do get into a fining situation with TCEQ, we can repurpose those dollars instead of paying a fine into the state coffers. We can repurpose those into projects that make sense for Alpine. We've got a wonderful gentleman in town by the name of Jeff Bennett. I think a lot of you know him. He's certainly one that we can lean on to help us through, because all SCP projects have to fall under the governance and the authority from TCEQ. They do have to be approved. So we've got assets and we've got resources in this town and people that can help us through these steps. Dr. Stockerson's here this evening. His daughter Kirsten and I, we were a couple grades apart, but we always, were very, very friendly, very good friends as kids growing up. And it's neat to see her, even though she has a residence in Austin, she spends quite a bit of time here in Alpine. When I looked through the new Parks Master Plan, I was blown away at the detail in the inventory. That's the thing that struck me the most, is just we now have a real good thorough inventory. Back in 2013 when I started, actually it was 2014, we were on the final year of a grant from the Texas Parks and Wildlife that we were not compliant on. And it put the city on a blacklist for 3 years where we could not apply for grants. It's nice to see that we're eligible again and that there's a master plan to go hand in hand with that. Certainly through that segue of time, we had the Friends of Big Bend Parks emerge and did a fantastic job at fundraising and building monies to help supplement for equipment across town. Tourism. I've heard from several people about tourism and how do we allocate dollars to Alpine to really build vibrant activities that draw folks in. I know there's been some consternation about some of the funding levels to other events and that going away. We do know specifically that the state law requires that we spend 50% of current year revenues against advertising. Beyond that, when you look at $650,000 to $700,000, there's ample dollars in there to benefit the arts, build on the mural program, and build on other events that are really drawing people in and helping some of these events that in the past were successful help them bring more to it. As I envision, this is one of those areas that we actually don't have a board or a committee on. It would be nice to have a representative from each ward and a few hoteliers that are on that committee that really makes that recommendation to council that then becomes approved as part of the budget. So that's something that I see as a bearing point and important relative to our tourism. The building inspections, we don't have a building inspector on staff. That's a concern. We've got a lot of projects that are queuing up, and we've got to have a stopgap and also fill that role. Mr. Robert Blanco was wonderful, and I'm glad he's finding success in Pflugerville, but we will have to source someone that wants to be here in Alpine and has that type of experience and certification. I heard a little bit of discussion relative to the courts and some of the court docket, and how do we make sure we're effectively managing, whether it's PD or whether it's code enforcement and their docket. Mr. Pond, I know we'll have a docket next week. My intention is to, once again, be engaged with that and understanding, making sure that we're flowing that through and that council is aware of how the ordinances are impacting the residents more than anything. Streets, I would say I had a wonderful relationship with Mr. Weber. Some of the trajectory that we were building on the streets was paving 25 to 35 blocks a year, doing full rebuilds, and then trying to seal coat another 75 to 100 streets. Looking at this latest resource that came back on this latest analytical set that would come up in the next couple of meetings, and how do we move forward as a state to get back on some pacing. I do know when the mayor ran for office the first time, that was something that the mayor, you had expressed as being very near and dear to you as well. The rest of the items are what I think about relative to our utilities, our water, wastewater tanks, our pumps that are out there, our wells. Do we have the right preventive maintenance projects in place? Do we have them queued up? Do we understand the life expectancy of these pieces of equipment? Do we have a team on staff that can work through the preventive maintenance schedule to ensure that we have a solid infrastructure for the citizens of Alpine? So that's what we see through the next series. And then, finally, I think about project management. How do we make sure that items, like when we buy a new bar screen, when we buy a new aerator, we have staff in place that's managing through those projects. It's an opportunity for us to step up our game and then report back out to council. Previously, when I was in the city manager role, I did the city manager report bi-weekly. One of the things I envision in the future as we go through these ideas is having a couple department heads in every council meeting to help kind of kick off that city manager report and drive that messaging back on what they're doing with their departments, and be certainly available for questions. That's the highlights of the plan. Questions?
Start with you.
Well, I really, my question that I had wanted to ask was what your plan was going forward, coming in, knowing some of the issues that we're dealing with, and this was really great to see this. And I want to know some of your priorities, and you got those down too. And I kind of was wondering if since this is going to be, you're going to get to do a redo or whatever, if there's anything that you'd like to do different, or that you, from your last experience, what you might do different this time.
Thank you. So previously, when my kids are growing, two boys are kind of off. One of the things that was very important to me back in 2013-17 was this high engagement, and I call it Alpine Bucks, and all those different activities. And what it did is it pulled me away from attending some of the other community functions. And I think the attendance at the community functions are extremely important, because from a venue perspective, it's kind of let your guard down and people feel more comfortable talking to you about what their perceptions are. So I certainly see that as a high bar and a need to be able to deliver on that. And the other thing is what I mentioned before. Previously I did the full city manager report. In retrospect, I would like to bring in a couple of our department heads to each council meeting to be able to read out themselves. I think when we talk about leadership and development, being able to articulate that to council as well as to the community, I think is going to be super, super important. So those are some of the differences that I see.
Hi, Eric. Welcome back.
Thank you.
I do have a couple of questions, but at the same time, comments that I'd like to make on my behalf. Now, as counselors, it is our responsibility to listen to and to the opinions and suggestions of our constituents, both within the ward, but also in Alpine at large. And I'd like to mention, as far as support for you, I think all of us received a couple of letters. One is from John Waters, publisher of the Big Bang Gazette, a glimmering overview. He definitely wants you back. The other is Mr. Dale Christopherson. He also favors your returning to public service here in Alpine. But I have to admit, Mr. Christopherson, I had to read your letter twice, and it was a little slower the second time, try to make connection between the snipe hunt and you know, going around looking for a city manager. But he also supports it. On the other hand, Eric, I came across from some people who comments were not so favorable. And some people were saying, be careful, watch out, really look at the situation and make a good decision. And favorable comments came from the unfavorable comments came because of the city of the Chamber of Commerce and the city of Alpine breakup, the MOU. And to be honest, that's when I came in as a counselor. And in fact, I'm still not up to speed as to really what happened. I know you were one of the chief negotiators, just aside from Councilman Stevens, in working with the chamber, but apparently there's still some bad vibes out there regarding the breakup. And then along with that, the one city employee who apparently was the city secretary, but had been representing the city of Alpine in that relationship between the chamber and then she was apparently investigated for investment of funds, somewhere in the vicinity of $30,000. And people are still saying, well, what happened? There were 30K. People are saying, well, apparently she was indicted, sent to house arrest, and said that she was going to be paying back in small amounts. Whether she did or not, I don't know. But it seems to a lot of people that there was too much of a harsh attitude and manipulation towards that city employee, and of course, you couldn't elect. And so a few folks were saying, you know, be careful. I also ran into a few ex-employees at Borders and church and a few other places, and that consider your unemployment or reemployment not so good. They give you a fair rating, primarily because they feel you're really not a good supervisor and leader. They described you, and from a little bit of experience I had with you during the time that I came in before you left, I assess you as a basically a democratic or a hands-off type of employee. And apparently that didn't go well with a lot of folks. And one comment that just came across from a lot of people is that, and I noticed that during my time when we were here, but it seems like you're a little too friendly with one councilman on this group. And I've heard comments from various people saying that this councilman is the one that's really running the city. They feel if you come back to the break, it's going to be the same, maybe even worse. I don't know. I think Jessica balked at the style of autocratic behavior, and well, we all know what happened. You know, and finally, the memo you sent me, which I appreciate, saying that I enjoy our working relationship Well, I was in position, and you had joined the council after Cynthia left. And my sense was that we communicated well and focused on the right steps for the city. The communications part, no problem, we communicated well. When I communicated with them, the focus on the right steps for the city. I don't recall actually ever sitting down with you and getting your full perspective of what you mentioned here. My focus at the time, I think along with the others, is we're here to work as a team to try to provide the best possible services for the city. That's a mission. But beyond that, I don't recall any time actually sitting down with you or hearing from you what are those right steps for the city. And then you mentioned in the letter about, I hope we get together and restart a working relationship and hear from me what are the needs for the community. And well, to begin with, I don't know if during your tenure, the first go around as city manager, what needs did you meet? What did you give to Ward 2? In the short 1.5 years that Jessica was here, she attended town hall meetings in Ward 2, encouraged residents to apply for hot funds for cultural and historic programs, was present at planned activities like the Festa del Barrio. She was there, and that helped bring that part of the community together. She helped with the installation of electrical outlets in Medina Park for future arts and music and park programs. And she proposed, and then the Parks Advisory Board led the initiative on the development of a 10-year Parks and Recreation Development Program for the city of Alpine. I mention this because it's amazing that the planners went out and knocked on doors in people's houses next to Medina Park and Bell Yukon Park, and asked, we know you have parks, you use them, what would you like to see as far as improvement for these parks and so forth? And they were delighted. I got feedback that they were delighted that they were asked to participate in the plan, which he initiated. Also, the streets pavement assessment plan for Alpine. A lot of people have found out about it. I'm happy that streets in Ward 2 were considered equally for all the streets in Alpine. Participation. And then for the future, since you asked what are some of the needs of the community, I would like to see from Ward 2 a health service clinic, more elderly services programs, home assistance, nutrition, etc. Extended library services and programs within the Ward 2 area. Business and employment development in Ward 2. Working with Sol Ross or maybe another university in the planning and development of a technical school in the Ward 2 vicinity or across the tracks. Planning and development of Hispanic or multicultural heritage center that focuses on history, culture, and the continuing education services with many level of all residents.
Answer. Nice.
I don't have anything.
Actually, today, I had people stop by, so I was outside my house, and they were happy to see that you were coming back. I had actually some city employees pass by, and they stopped, and they were also very happy that you're coming back, ready to move forward. And you answered all my questions on your report.
Councilor Stevens.
So I have a number of questions that I have some comments as well. I made a list of 15 questions and some of my comments. I will write those down. Some of them you've already addressed. Your interest in coming back to Alpine, is it a long-term or a short-term, and do you have plans to purchase property here as a home?
Yes, sir. So the plan is a long-term plan. The boys are in college now. Everybody doesn't know I have 3 children, 2 boys and a daughter. My daughter will finish high school in Albuquerque and have access to a lot of scholarships like I mentioned earlier. Dee Dee and I are going to buy a smaller footprint home where we are not going to buy a 3,000 square foot fixer-upper again. Took my back out and was just not a great spending time. So we're really looking at this as a smaller footprint home. Dee Dee, the other little known thing is she hasn't finished her bachelor's degree. She was very close at St. Ross, and that was probably another one of those big ruts that we had in 2017. So her intention is to finish that degree up at St. Ross. I'll have to maybe request the provost or Dr. Barham to ensure she doesn't regress back in credits. But if she does, that's okay. You know, the more we learn, the better. With that being said, you know, then that will help her, you know, find, you know, some work that she wants to do in the area, you know, in the Alpine area as well. So, yeah, it's not the HR thing. You never ask how old are you. I'm 47. I'd like to work till I'm 65. So really, that 18-year period is what I envision. The other piece that I will tell you is stepping back into the private sector for a couple of years. It's a rat race. Technology is a rat race. Putting down roots and connecting and doing something of greater purpose is important. And as I reflect back on that time in Alpine and how, you know, how do you become a better city manager, I see the purpose behind that as well. So intentionally, it's to stay for the longer term. And you know, have my wife finish her degree as well and participate.
There's an elephant in the room, and council want to leave us when I didn't use my name, pointing his finger directly at me. Okay, and I'm going to be very direct about it. Okay? It has been alleged, and Mr. Lambert's in the back who raised it at the last meeting, that the sole reason for my emphasis to hold the past city manager accountable for lack of performance, and I can go countless through items, was that my intent was to bring you back. Would you please share with council your perspective on that particular topic and contacts and how that dialogue went? Because I'm tired of being accused of a lie. Okay, I'm going to be very direct about that. I will point my finger.
You're saying that, Mike?
I'm sorry?
Okay, good.
No, it's not a lie. It's about a direct statement. And Mayor, in all due fairness, when someone accuses me
But don't point
of
fingers,
making a
please.
statement, fine, I will respond back. Okay? So,
You're not accusing me of being a liar.
I'm not accusing you of being a liar at all. I'm just tired of, I've been accused of that. And so I want to get that with the rest. Okay?
You know, certainly, you know, Dick and Jean have been here in Alpine since the 70s. You know, my father and I have a wonderful relationship. You know, I'm thankful for the amount that we communicate. I think much like a lot of us communicate with our friends. So, you know, he's certainly kept me abreast of some of the changes. And I want to say it was late March, early April, I did have a couple employees reach out to me. And they were concerned. They were feeling a heightened level of stress in the role. And they didn't feel like communication was happening, and there was some greater turnover. At that juncture of time, I did talk to a few other folks, and I was asked the question in and around May or early June, were you interested in coming back to Alpine? And I was asked that on 2 separate occasions, and my response was, council has to determine what action and where they're going with the current city manager. She was the one that was sourced, and she was the one that was in the role. And if council finds that direction, and if she's successful, then that's a great thing. If council takes a different direction and I'm contacted, would I be interested in the role? I said I'd be glad to have that discussion on 2 separate occasions. As some of the documented issues came up, I think Mr. Street had called me, Mr. Waters had called me asking me questions about my relationship with Megan Antrim. And for those who've read the articles, they know that I gave a very glowing response. Megan did a nice job when I was the city manager. And then I certainly continued to observe what was happening here in Alpine, to include being asked to come back and interview. After that point in time, I tried to reach out to all of the counselors to have discussion about the interview. I had talked to many employees, past and present, relative to the role. After the action was taken 2 weeks ago by having me come in to interview is when I really started reaching out more clearly and succinctly to members in the community. Because beyond just council, I felt it was important to reach out to citizens, whether they were business owners, whether they were people that had coached me in baseball, where I played golf with at the golf course. So that was how we got to today. Cynthia Salas is, when I left in 2017, something I always shared with her is at any point, if you need anything, call me. I've always tried to have an open door. I didn't leave here in any sort of negative pretense. So I always felt like having open dialogue with people was important.
Could you, thank you for that, could you comment about what you learned at the time it came to make the decision to bring the convention center under the city responsibility and take that away from the chamber?
Yeah. So relative to that point in time, 2016 is when you take monies from the hotel occupancy tax fund, you give it to another entity to run a visitor center. There is a requirement that they keep a separate book and record and do not commingle funds with their current operating funds. So in the case of this, the chamber has to keep a separate bank account that can be audited and needs to be reviewed by the city. And early 2016, I had been asking for that separation, that audit, so I could review. My back was in significant turmoil, up to including back surgery. And I was out 5 weeks and came back, and that was, getting that audit back from them and that review was not a heightened priority. We were in the middle of paving season. We had a couple of new counselors. So in the fall of 2016 is when I really started more assertively asking the chamber at that point, hey, we need to get this in. During that tenure, during that time is when Molly Taylor had retired, and we originally, council had hired a lady who didn't come to Alpine to take the role, and then Kaylee Cotton, who's the executive director at the council, or at the chamber, came over as city secretary. At that juncture was when we did receive an output from QuickBooks, a CSV file or an Excel file, and looked through that and immediately was alarmed at the large dollar withdrawals and reflected back questions to the chamber relative to those large withdrawals, just to have a deeper understanding of what those dollars were being used for. That was when that separation occurred at that juncture to bring the chamber of the visitor center under the direction of the city of Alpine, and then also Ms. Cotton. I believe she resigned, and then she was indicted post that. As far as what's happened post that, her repayment, I'm not versed. I, at that point, had recommended that we hire the council look at Cynthia Salas, who was sitting in Ward 2 as a council person, to that going to city secretary.
There have been some discussions, and you talked about the importance of tourism and allocating the hotel occupancy tax funds and some approaches to go with that. There have been some discussions that were started by the former city manager about creating a convention center. Do you have any perspective on a convention center in St. Helena?
Yeah, so when I think about convention center, I mean, first thing I think about is size, right? If you have a 20 or 30,000 square foot floor space, that's that type of facility to maintain over a year-in, year-out basis is a lot of dollars. Generally speaking, if you look at your construction cost, if it's $3 or $4 million, you're going to have 8 to 10% of that in ongoing maintenance costs. Knowing that we were doing about $10,000 a year in revenue out of the Civic Center, I certainly worry that something like a large convention center is not going to be able to cash flow from a financial perspective. We'd love to look at somebody's performer business plan. What I do see in other communities, though, is public-private partnerships being very effective, where you might have a hotelier come in, or you might have an existing hotel that wants to build a larger venue to attract more people in. I had the chance of visiting with Catherine Parker as well, who owns the Quarter 7 Circle. She's certainly trying to expand her footprint. Before I left, I had spoke with Vic Botka, as well as Dr. Vinod Gandhi and Johnny Paresh and his wife are part of the Yang Hospitality Group. And they're both groups, the Botkas and Yang Hospitality Group are both groups that are looking at building larger hotel type that might have some meeting space that would attract in. In that environment, I certainly think that the city can look at maybe there's some sort of tax abatement that they might apply for, or there may be some sort of guaranteed amount of events that are going to be hosted there. Civic Center here, as we see, we went through that remodel with it, converted it from kind of a Gillies bar motif to a more flat, functional 8,000 square foot facility. But it's an important venue for birthdays, quinceañeras, wedding anniversaries, reunions, different shows in the town. So I think that's important for the city to maintain that as a good working facility too. So I don't see the city being able to distribute $300,000 or $400,000 to maintain a facility if it was a $4 to $5 million bill. The hotel occupancy tax, right now is projected to bring in $650,000 to $700,000 a year, and so you'd be taking half of that to go towards that.
One of the things I noted on your staffing is a grant writer specialist, and I think you talked about the background you bring is business expertise, not exactly the government side. Can you give us a little more flavor about how you would see a grant writer or a specialist supporting the city to go bring dollars from the outside?
So one of the things that happens when we're in the middle of the day-to-day operation of the city is we kind of get deep into the issues at hand, and it prevents us from doing some of the proactive thought and the proactive work. And my sense is that's where grant writers really excel, is being able to look through all the different initiatives and whether it's CDBG grants, whether it's grants for our police force, whether it's grants for parks, CDBG, water, wastewater type grants. And that person, as I envision and think about it, would be able to spend that constructive time sourcing that for the city. But then on the back end, the administrative side, right? So if you go out and get a grant to replace fire hydrants, you have certain timing to meet. Otherwise, those grant monies you don't receive, the city has to pay for it out of its own coffers. Grants, as we know, can be very tedious and time-consuming to fill out, to write, to follow. And I sense that somebody administrative is wrong. But we do have a lady in town, Marcia Duck, who's wonderful. I think she's on the Parks Board as well. She has experience in that, so I envision someone of that nature. Any other sports city there?
So I know you play golf. What's your perspective about the city's responsibility and relationship with the golf course and the country club?
Yeah, so I learned playing golf. Dad prepared 2 coffee cans in the back lot behind our house, but then he put me into a continuing ed program at Sul Ross, where Dotson taught that. It was back in the late 70s. And I learned to play golf on this golf course. And I think about the groups that we have, whether it's Sul Ross State University, whether it's Border Patrol, and just general employees, looking at Alpine as a place to be in activities. We're very much an outdoor. So golf is a great sport for the outdoors. Because it's in somewhat of, it's within the confines of the city limits, and so it's a big presence in our city. Anybody who drives over Loop Road sees the magnificence of that. And what I do know is that they have historically tried to run it through a board and keep their dues very low to attract people. And so that golf courses, run an average 18-hole golf course, you're talking about $350,000 to $400,000 a year just in maintenance dollars. Very expensive. So the golf courses had to be resourceful. They do a lot of work weekends where folks, their members come and volunteer. Now, I think the perimeter from a city perspective is hugely important, right? Because the golf course itself is going to manage the greens, the tee boxes, and the fairways. But I do think we certainly have some opportunity, especially as we look at Fighting Buck Avenue and Brown Street, to help facilitate. Historically, we've cleaned out the creek every few years, but I think there's opportunity there. We've also looked at how do you expand the wastewater recharge that goes back to the tank on the side of the golf course. How do you work with them on distributing that water, not just on the north side of the creek, but then how do you push that to the south side as well? So those are things that I think we can do to certainly help the country club in that aspect.
Eric, I'd like to shift gears a little bit, and I don't presuppose that there's any decision by council, but I want to make sure council has some sense about contractual side. Let's assume council would consider offering you a contract. What would be the important terms from your standpoint about a contract? The city charter is very specific. It says that the city manager will be hired indefinitely, and the fact is, reality is that we've put contracts in place with finite terms and severance clauses. Can you give us some perspective associated with that?
So it's interesting. I did have cause to look back through my previous contract, and there was one point in there that was actually wrong. It was originally a 3-year term, and according to the charter, there is no term. It's an indefinite period of time. When I think about the rest of that, obviously, you don't need to start over on this. When we think about employee relationship, whether it's me or whether it's others, I always think about what those steps are. Salary is always one component. Healthcare is another component. Time off becomes that other component. Relative to healthcare, what's specific to me, I mean, I still carry health insurance on my family. I like health insurance immediately. Relative to benefits, I'd like to bridge my time from previous almost 4 years I served. So from a time off perspective, I've got that sort of thing. Previously I'd done salary plus a car allowance that seemed to work well. And I'll go straight into salary at this point because that becomes a contextual part of the conversation that I've had with folks. And when I look at what Chuy Garcia, who was in this role for 7 years prior to, he was paid somewhere between $90,000 and $100,000 a year. He also was using a significant amount of contractors and engineers to supplement his role. I mean, Naismith in particular was one that had been paid $640,000 from the previous 4 years before I started. So effectively, when you look at that consulting side too, all in, the city was paying more than a quarter million. When I came in, I stopped that consulting and engineering because I felt that was, a heavy spend for the city, and it was important to pull those costs down. My last salary that I had here was $125,000. Then I think forward to the offers and the hiring of the subsequent people. G. Spangle, who was the first person offered the job, he turned it down. He was offered $145,000 by council. He was out of Houston and he felt like he needed more. And then Jessica was hired. I believe her end salary was somewhere around 133, 134. The other thing that happened is that creep back in of the consultants and the engineers to provide studies. I know the street study was close to north of 40,000. There was another contract put in place with Park Hill for about 150,000 for some administrative oversight. So when I look at that, I think of all in, you take what that city manager was making and those city, or those consultants doing work that I had previously done. Now, I'm not a PE. I would never advertise myself as a professional engineer. There are certain activities that have to have a professional engineer to stand involved in. You would never certain things. But those dollars are small. So, I'm looking at what's currently being paid from city manager and consultants, and I'm seeing that north of $300,000. I would never ask for anything in that range at all. What I do like to be able to express is the context of where the city was at, and then what my full-time salary was, and then the cash outflow that was going post my departure. So I think that's important for me to think about salary. But really, to kind of round out your question, I think about salary, I think about healthcare, I think about that time off. The next little bit of time, we're going to be doing a little bit more traveling back and forth. But we really do have a great vacation holiday program here. It's good to balance your time away. I think most people I talk to in this room and outside of this room. I hope I didn't miss anything.
No, you got it. I also noticed in your application that you submitted that you would like, if you were hired, a stand-up desk. I have to read this now.
We did have a stand-up desk when I was here. So I think everybody in town that knew me at the time, I actually had 5 bad discs, 2 were herniated. It was hunched over 30 degrees. I don't get good back flow or blood flow in the back. so I have to stand. This is my most comfortable position. I'm happy you allowed me to stand instead of sit tonight, but I do try to stand half the day.
I have no more questions.
Okay, well, welcome back to Alpine. I do have some questions. One is when I first became mayor, you and I had kind of a challenging relationship. If you recall, I came in, my office was gone. Then you told me, after the fact, well, we moved you to the back, which I didn't care, but just a little courtesy. Then a few weeks later, you asked me if I wanted to move to the annex. And you said, you don't have to, you can, you want, you don't have to, but I need the room in my office. And I noticed at that period of time when I came in, everybody was real hush-hush. No one would talk to me because of the fact I was asking about the monies that were missing and had they really been repaid and whatnot. So apparently there was folks who were feeling some guilt about it. So anyway, from there on, you and I, we got along, and we didn't have that relationship like the city manager should have. When the streets were being repaved, and I asked you about these sewer holes that Jared was just paving right over, which is wrong. That there's a ring that can be bought to put in there to level the street. You said, well, they're too expensive, we don't have them. They were over at the city department, the street department. So I went and checked. Okay, so some of those little issues is where I have my concern. Is it going to be a challenge again, or is it going to be somewhat different? Okay, you are a great mathematician, don't get me wrong. You did bring the budget in balance within the 2 years, so I applaud you for that. But I'm just talking about that. Also, there was, 5 demands, I think, that was in the radio or something. I think someone had brought it up last meeting, that you want those 5 demands met before, you'd accept the job. You remember what demands they were?
I don't remember addressing any demands to anyone. I think relative to the contract, Councilor Stevens' question, relative to my thoughts and how you pull a contract together was what I envisioned. In fact, I was aware of that comment. My dad and I were talking about it. He asked me, what were those demands? That's not the tenor of how I operate either. I prefer this open spirit dialogue discussion. And relative to, communication, Mayor, one of my goals, as I stated to Councilmember Curry earlier, was to really push more open dialogue and discussion. And that's not just for citizens, but for, anybody and everybody. And certainly, if you feel like we're not connecting at some point, we're going to need to make sure we take time out and sit down and look at how we connect and how we make sure that we're handling the best business and the best experience for residents and tourists.
Okay, so that we could, should you be given the position, that will change then. We'll have more open communication, not only with myself, but also with the community, because I had asked you once that where are the department heads? When I moved to Alpine in 11, I was coming to meetings and we had all the department heads were here. And you said, oh, they don't need to be here at the meeting. Now you're saying otherwise, that you want to have them here. But I think they should be here to hear what citizens have to say and to give us a report on what they're doing out here. Okay? I think that's crucial in any operation. The other one is, you mentioned your back. I know you have the back operation when you were still there as city manager. How is your back, and, well, how would I put this? We have to look at our health insurance also, because you have a pre-existing condition now, because you're actually getting issued, you get hired, you'd be a rehire, so you'd be starting over. We just got through with an issue, health issue on another employee. So we need to know that also.
Well, I don't see that his back would be an issue since it was previously covered by the city health insurance.
Right. What I'm saying, okay, and you're not fully recovered, so I have to stand up and.
Mayor?
Yes.
Mayor Ramos, I'm sorry.
That's
Oh,
going.
I'm sorry, you're the.
But that's going into a matter that you shouldn't be discussing with an employee regarding
I'm just-
those matters.
Then we need, I'll refrain from that.
It's really, it actually violates federal and state law.
I know you mentioned about his back, so.
Elaborate on Sorry, I was just gonna say, sir, that you could, we cannot ask that question. It's
Okay.
legally not allowed.
Then I'll withdraw that
Thank
then,
you.
okay. Yes, ma'am. Okay. So, that's just basically some of the stuff that deal with TCQ. I had brought the letters copies that I was getting to you, and you said they were being handled. And apparently the water director was not handling them. Consequently, the former city manager had to go to talk to TCQ about those things because they were not receiving reports at all. Okay, so, and that we were put in bad light with TCQ then. So that's something I think we need to stay on top of, and I think Councilman Stevens brought that up, and you brought that up also. Those things are something that we cannot just chuck away. Okay, so what we had done, all the mail that concerned TCQ is going to the city manager now.
TCQ should be sending both notices to, they should send out two notices, one to the mayor and then one to the city manager. It's set up as a stopgap to ensure that there's clarity both with the governing officials and the administration. I will say that in 2013, when I started, we had significant violations of TCQ. The old racetrack is full of sludge. We had a myriad of things that we worked through, and many of those take years to remediate. We were on a good trajectory. Part of what is important, I think if we look back at the series and sequencing of meetings, agendas from 2013 to 2017, we'll see many times where we had updates on TCQ. Intentionally, we will continue to do that so that there's heightened visibility.
Yeah, and for the record, it didn't happen during your tenure. It goes beyond that when these fines were being assessed. So,
At the end of the day, it's all city of Alpine dollars that we're trying to maximize productive, not fine-based, and collectively, we want great visibility.
what's your vision with the wastewater, the treatment plant?
Well, last week, council took action to improve the bar screen, a new area here in Bell Press. There's also a building out there that had been purchased. As I see the top multiple priorities out at the wastewater treatment plants, it's the implementation of those items that have been purchased or, as Salas said, are about to be purchased with that aerator. The aerator is important because you've got to oxygenate the wastewater as it comes in to help with your sludge prep. And so I always enjoy going out to the wastewater treatment plant and seeing the progression over time. We'll continue to do that. We'll continue to use images and pictures and invite council members out if they want to take a tour. We've certainly had citizens come out and take tours as well. Some folks don't like the wastewater treatment plant, so that's okay. We'll handle it.
I've worked around it, so I don't have a problem with that. I've been there several times.
But here's another interesting thing, and I actually had an opportunity to talk to Ginger Turner. One of the questions earlier was about purchasing a home. Ginger had sold my previous home, so certainly my first call relative to what's inventory look like is to her. But I know she's heavily involved with the Christian Academy here and talking with younger generation, right? What happens when you pour water down the sink, or you flush the commode, or you take a shower? How does that travel through our city? And what happens? And I think we have a tremendous opportunity there to educate our younger generation here so that when they exit high school, and there's some curriculum that is available here in our state, that last year they can be prepared to test for a water license D and a wastewater license D. So the kids coming out of high school, many kids, the military or university work is not their destination. They just love being here in the community, right? And giving them that path, that starting path as they exit out. And part of that goes back to helping train and show them, whether it's through a field trip or through some exploratory observation, so that we build that excitement. So I certainly was more elaborate on that than maybe was necessary, but that's the kind of stuff that excites me.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
It's,
Please come up to here.
Council and Mayor Oscar Cobo's Ward 5. In previous occasions, Mr. Zimmer is aware of this. In reference to the airport, there was an occasion when several had filed several bids to bring an FBO to the airport. And at that time, it was basically what we know, I can explain, is to privatize the airport. And Mr. Zimmer is aware of this. At that time I applied, I wanted to see the bids, and of course, got a cold shoulder to file a Texas Public Information request. And it still was ignored completely. And as I shared in previous meetings, that the McCamey Law Firm ignored it completely, which I have a reference letter to that, by the Attorney General's office, and a letter from the McCamey received also. So all these things that were going on, like, you need to hear about this. You know, one thing that comes to mind again, Skyway Development on West Brown Street under Mr. Zimmer's 10 block. Skyway Development on South 11th Street again, and Skyway Development is here again. So we're gonna have to deal with it on Mr. Zimmer's clock if he gets hard tonight. But what really concerns me the most also tonight is, we know for a fact that there's, and this is a real world here, being in all honesty, that there's been talk. You all have had talks already with Mr. Zimmer, and it's obvious. We all know. So tonight we come, because there's reference letters already, there's things going on here from several people, and so basically what we're seeing tonight is not much transparency. Where do we sit here tonight? Because tonight what we have is half a coffee pot for the people. Because there's already been talks, reference letters, this and that. You know, and that's why people get on the edge of the seat. There's mistrust and all that's going on. Yes, we've gone through several managers, through several situations. I drive down Holland, right between both one-ways. I push the issue on the creek, and then I have to push it, and I was labeled, and when I touched on the issues as a attacking city staff, I was okay. You know, it's sad. You know, but as I go down the one-way, those dried up trees between both one-ways are big. You know, whether management or no management, I wonder who's going to take care of the small issues. Two key things for this community where many have told us it was depressing. Economic development and infrastructure. We can have city managers on top of city managers, and if nothing goes in that direction, we're just stuck in the Middle Ages, and people suffer the consequences. Now, going back to the area of consultants, and these were maybe consultants, I think there's always those opportunities to visit and to have consultants. Recently, the city approved, $20,000 for consultant fees for the manager, $70,000 for the parks master plan, and this and that and everything else. It's going to keep going on. When are we going to really come down to the wire? Because once again, you all are the leaders. And I recall the time when, and I'm being transparent here, being honest, when Mr. Zimmer said, I'm leaving, and Mr. Councilman Stevens moved back from California and just said, oh, we're gonna give you a bigger raise now. And we'll see those numbers again, they'll float on top. So all this, we ask for transparency and to move on. There's room for improvement for all of us. You all are the leaders. But also we gotta, as I mentioned in that letter, there's principle beyond preference. And there's also legal opinion that we gotta look at all the time. A lot of things do not fall in line for the respect of the people, no Gmail, no letters of resolution passed for announcements, but I guess this is why people get uneasy in this community. Where our minds are coming from. Are we doing this fast and furious? Surely the roof isn't caving in. Let's get a city manager overnight. But I ask that you have wisdom. Thank you.
My name is Joe Torres, and I live outside the city limits, but I own business here in town, so properties here in town. And what I would like to say is, Mr. Zimmer brought up, that's about roots in the city. And yes, I coached Mr. Zimmer in baseball, you know? I've known him since he was little, you know? Know a lot of people here since they were little. And I've been here for quite a long time. I know our city attorney, Rod Pop. Known him for a long time, good man. We did good by hiring him. But at this moment in time, we have an interim police chief, Mr. Darrell Sawyer. Speaking of roots, I think he's a great candidate for chief of police.
Thanks, sir. Yes, sir, Carl. And we'll take one more, then move on.
Carl Fleming, Ward 5. I would like to commend Mr. Zimmer for having the gumption to stand up before this city council in a live interview and not in executive session. The people now have a little better idea, Mr. Zimmer, of what goes on between the city council and manager. Everybody has their own opinions on certain things. Nobody's perfect. And when I worked with Mr. Zimmer as on planning and zoning, we had a couple of disagreements, but we agreed to disagree and life moves on. But I think rather than try to get another pig in a poke, I think the city council would do the city of Alpine good to hire this man. Thank you.
Dale.
I can be quite brief. Dale Christopher, the Ward 5. I really appreciate Councilman Rodriguez mentioning that he had read what I sent you. And I appreciate you all doing that. You may or may not agree, but I appreciate you willing to look at it. I did want to say, though, with regard to the current city manager situation, if you think back just a little bit to the past 5 or 6 city managers that we've had, and I mean, just when I mention council, I don't mean you guys necessarily, but just past city councils. Out of those last 5 or 6 hires, how many were successful? I don't think we're going to count very far. We had lots of problems. Hiring, going out on a search is a fishing expedition, and no matter how carefully you do it, and as you know, I pleaded with you to be careful about the vetting, but no matter how carefully you do it, sometimes things just don't work out. And our past councils have not had a very good batting average recently. We did get a real winner when you hired Eric in 2013. We had several years of real good movement forward, digging out of a deep hole, and leaving with things underway. We're just so fortunate that he's willing to come back and deal with getting us going again. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor, may I?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I just want council to take into consideration the position that we're in. We don't have any directors at all. We've got challenges daily, and not just one, but 4 or 5 daily. And we need someone, again, like I said at the last meeting, that needed to start yesterday. And just to summarize this, you know, if I get sick tomorrow or I have an emergency to go to, there will be nobody in the city of Alpine that can make things happen here or even take a call to be able to listen to something. So please take that into consideration.
Mayor, if I could add to that, the city charter, and I'm not going to talk about personalities, I'm going to talk about law. The city charter requires that the city manager appoint department heads. Y'all have half a dozen department heads that are empty, that the Alpine business can't go forward unless you have department heads. You've got 9 major supervisory positions that need to be appointed, and those need to be appointed in consultation between the department head and the city manager. So until you get a city manager in place, you can't do anything, you're stuck. And if you think back about, I've been city attorney in public service for 20 years. There's always a tension between trying to find the best qualified person from out of town, who's got all these qualifications, or hire somebody local. Well, you hire somebody from out of town and they don't have the city's interest at heart, and they blow up on it. And that's what's happened time after time in Alpine. And in Mr. Zimmer, you actually have somebody that's local but has experience. And that's a rare breed in my experience. Because usually you get somebody local that doesn't have experience, or you get somebody from out of town that doesn't care about the city. And so the last several city managers in Alpine, the out-of-towners are the ones that haven't worked out. So that's just my observation.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, if I also can make an observation is, I'm not against Derek at all. He's qualified, he's already been in a position, he knows what needs to get done and so forth. But the process that we're going through, and how and why we got here, is what I question. We are in a crisis, but it's a crisis that we developed because of bad decisions upon bad decisions upon bad decisions, and here we are. And now we're at a point that we have to make a decision on the city manager. And if we go whatever decided, of course, no problem. But the way we're doing it is because we have a crisis. Now we need to find a savior to come in and take care of it and then go on. When we think about equal opportunity, when we think about, I mean, there are other people out there that are equally or maybe better qualified, I don't know. But are we doing a service to the others out there by not announcing, by not selecting and interviewing and giving them that equal opportunity? And if we go this route, what are people outside in the local area and the regional area going to be looking at when they look at Alpine? Or in Alpine, they get away with anything they want to do? Maybe. They're in a crisis and they needed to act quickly? Maybe. I don't know. But it seems like we got ourselves in a position where, and it wasn't Jessica's fault, it was our fault.
It wasn't just, because if council had seen and been able to observe and interacted or engaged more with what was going on with the city, we would not be in the situation we are now. We would not have been in it. We have failed our citizens and our employees.
And I agree with Councilman Rivas, we have put ourselves in this position, and we shouldn't have. You know, we had the chance, we had some folks we interviewed, we had the chance to make a decision then, we didn't. Okay, now we're at a crisis.
We are, yes, sir.
So, but ultimately, it's going to be up to council. Okay? And I'm just, for the record, I agree with what Councilman Rivas said. Okay, yes, sir.
So I'd like to make sure we don't rewrite history in this process.
Yeah, well, that's, yeah.
Okay, so in case to be perfectly clear, we interviewed 4 people, and we council agreed that Jessica did not have authority to go hire those 4 people. We agreed by majority.
No.
Well, that was the vote.
No. That was a vote, but the reality is, we hired her, we gave her that authority.
We, according to
I
the
don't know, maybe
charter,
maybe this is council's.
Yeah,
Well, does it really matter at
Yeah.
this
doesn't
point?
matter, we are where we are.
let's go back to item number one.
So,
Yours.
So Eric, I have to ask the pointed question, because it's an important part of council's discussion. And I've played with back and forth about what the right sequence is, but since council's the one that has to make a decision, we thought we'd ask you, and you put a number on the table first. What's your view of an acceptable salary for a city manager if the council will move forward to make you an offer?
So I get to go first, right? Was that the number one rule of negotiation is go second? You know, I hope I couched some of the thought process that I go through or went through earlier relative to what Chuy Garcia had paid, and what the city was paying for consultants, what I was paid, assuming what Jessica paid. I have also looked through some of the TCMA website, which is the same website data that we used to look through for employee salaries and city manager salaries. Know where the that average salary is, and then I would also look at saying that the performance I gave was above average when I was here. I certainly understand and appreciate the context of some of the thoughts around maybe where I was a little bit remiss. But I think I've done a good job at mapping out certainly the successes and where we were at. So I think about that. I think Jessica was paid 134. NG was offered 145. NG didn't have the same experience level that I did.
And she wanted 182.
Yeah, but council offered him 145.
Yeah.
My sense is that I would be offered no less than 145. Council had determined that NG would have been paid that. My sense is no less than that, potentially a little bit more. Like I said earlier, if you look at the cash outlay of the city for that administrator as well as the consultant engineers, the city has been paying well over $300,000 for that role. That's untenable, unattainable. Those dollars, can be re-entered in for us.
Mayor, by way of comparison, in Pecos, the city manager is paid $135,000 a year, but the city also pays for a house.
They're in a different financial bracket.
I know, but I'm just saying that puts their total above
Mayor, I just have a question. I think it's wonderful that everyone's agreed to do this in an open session. And to get the idea that Eric just brought up and gave you a number. But beyond this point, you don't have to work out a contract. And you're not going to try to sit here and come to those terms tonight. So I'm just saying, you've got a good start, whatever the next move is.
I think we need to look at, what asking salary is, and I think we need to think about that also.
So as I have done in the past, I do my homework.
Okay, do you have
Okay.
homework?
And the City Management Compensation Survey done by the Texas City Management Association, which is publicly available data. You can pick it up anytime, and for the last 4 years since I've been on council, I've brought that data forward to council every time we're looking at what city managers make. And I take that data and I cut it and provide, and there are 57 cities in the state of Texas. There's 10 pages ranging anywhere from small cities to those that are tens of thousands of people. In fact, if I look here, Abilene, 122,000 people. They pay their city manager $212,000. I narrow it down to the 57 that are between 5,000 and 10,000. The assessment and the rationale behind that is the city of Alpine certainly has a population listed in the survey of 6,400. We have a service area that includes Fort Davis, for gas utilities, and includes many in the county. We are a city that has a municipal airport. We are a city that has a responsibility to support Colorado State University. And so when I look at all that, I said I just made the range between 5 and 10,000 the numbers. To give you some perspective, the average of those cities, which range as low as 5,000, that's the actual minimum, how they got down to 5,000. There's a city right now, 5,000, that pays their city manager $130,000. But the average is $126,789. That's the average over the 57 cities. The minimum salary for those 57 cities is $67,553. Okay? The maximum salary for cities in that range is $260,844. So when you go through and come up with the average, it's 126. Being the certified mathematician that I am, I also compute means, and means are 119, so about 120,000. As was pointed out, council well knows and the city knows, our current city, or the past city manager is making $134,000 a year. We brought her in at $130,000, and she got the increased bump up through no action of ours, but through the cost of living increase. When I look at the numbers that I went through between 5 and 10,000, there are 16 cities with salaries above $140,000. There are 16 cities with salaries above $145,000, and 20%, or 1/5, has salaries above $150,000. My view is you kind of always throw out the top and throw out the bottom, because they tend to be off in some stratosphere different than we're used to. If we were to take Mr. Zimmer's former salary, the one he was making when he resigned his position, by the way, I'd point out, his contract at the time had a clause in it, same as our previous city manager, Ms. Garza, had in it. It said if we terminated the contract, then we were obligated to pay out the city manager 6 months' salary and benefits. And I would say to Mr. Zimmer's credit, he worked really hard to give council sufficient notice, so we did not have to pay that out. So there was no termination associated with Mr. Zimmer's contract. He gave us advance notice, we worked it, we eventually hired Ms. Garza in the process. She, on the other hand, took the severance package. If you took $125,000 and did a 5% increase, which one could argue pluses or minuses, our previous city manager put in a 10% increase for her upcoming, which council had not determined yet, but that would put his salary at $137,810 if you went 5% year over year. Mr. Zimmer has given us a number of 140 is the bare minimum. Did I get that right? 145? 145, thanks. That's what I wrote my notes down. My view, to Dale Christopherson's point, this is not the place to work out final details, but to move this off top dead center one way or the other, and there's a number of contract clauses that would have to get sorted out. I will make the motion that the city rehire Eric Zimmer as the city manager for $145,000 per year, plus health care benefits, plus the city car, and we'll have to sort out, because we lease cars now and have to sort out what that looks like, and that we bridge his time period from to include the 4 years of previous service. That is the motion.
Is there a second? Motion's been made and second. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed? Like sign. Okay, motion carries.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Zimmer? Thank you. I presume, Rod, you'll have to work the
I will.
contract and all that. in the next
I will,
meeting.
Council.
Okay, item 2. Let's go with Mr. Stevens.
So item number 2 is, as part of our responsibility again, we have to discuss and consider take appropriate action to approve the fiscal year 19-20 budget for the city of Alpine. As Mr. Olivas pointed out last time, we had a couple of mistakes in the report, and therefore wanted to bring that back again. And I would propose that the city of Alpine approve the fiscal year 19, fiscal year 20 budget for the city of Alpine at $12.870775 dollars, or a 0% increase from where we are in 2018 and 2019.
Is there a second? Second. Okay. Any discussion? I think we spent a lot of time on this thing. A lot of time. Our overtime's not included in that either. Okay? No discussion, all those in favor?